Half our life is spent trying to find something to do with the time we've rushed through life trying to save. Will Rogers, 1949. This project had many facets, was rather involved, and took quite a long time. As a result, this video is long too. Hang in there with me, and hopefully you'll find the result worthwhile. Enjoy. Patio Gates. Some friends just had a new patio with a seat wall added to their home. It's a very warm and inviting area, and it's going to get a lot of use. In addition to frequent entertaining, it'll be used during the day as a play area for their grandchildren. Unfortunately, there are no gates at the wall openings to keep the little ones contained. After some conversation, I volunteered to make 2 gates for the purpose. In further talks, it became apparent that the old world design style was their preference. I'm not sure that they realized what they were asking for, but that's what's on the menu. My first job was to collect some visual examples of what old world design style gates might look like. After looking at many pictures, discarding some, adding others, quite a bit of hemming and hawing, some minor hand-wringing, and questions, a sample was found to be used as the basis for the design. In general, the term Old World is an adjective that refers to former times in Europe. An Old World style is a mixed breed. It draws from the design conventions that spanned the 16th and 17th centuries. Its influences stem from several different places, such as the Mediterranean coasts of Spain and Italy, and the countryside of France, in a variety of periods, including medieval and Renaissance. The look always has a sense of antiquity and a stately air of bygone centuries. It features distressed wood for an antique appearance, raised panels, palettes of warm and inviting colors, oversized and bold wrought iron hardware, and older and heavier materials that are rustic yet durable, creating an atmosphere that seems to be from another time. The first step in the process was to sketch the patio and the 2 gate openings, one on the east and one on the west. I then refined the diagram in order to get an accurate plan of what I had to work with. As I said a moment ago, an old world style gate would mean old looking and distressed, maybe barnwood. Durable and sturdy, therefore thick. Thick would translate to heavy. Heavy would mean problems. Each gate would have to be about 2.5 feet tall, 4 feet wide, and 4 to 5 inches thick. A solid core 4-foot wide gate would sag and would be way too heavy to hang on their seat wall. Leaving the core empty and just designing a shell wouldn't be durable, and it would lead to the racking of the gate. The answer? A core made of a torsion box, just like a hollow core door, light, strong, and durable. The torsion box. So, I designed a torsion box, and the construction began. I cut the members to width, and then to length. I roughed the layout, I added some glue to the inner frame with small brads to act as clamps. After 45 minutes, the glue dried. and I could add the top and bottom rails. The side stiles, the crown supports, and finally the bracing. And the torsion box is done. The crown. The crown is made up of 4 pieces, 2 filler strips in the center, and 1 piece for the shell on each side. After making a template, 2 filler strips were cut to size and glued together. As I said earlier, it was decided to use reclaimed barn wood for the shell of the gates. Although the place where we got the barn wood scanned it for nails and other debris, it's always a good idea to wand it again, just in case. In addition to safety hazards, saw and plane blades are too costly to have nails run past them. So although I don't show it here, all of the wood for both gates was wanded and any foreign material was removed. Most old barnwood siding in this area is 12 inches wide, with half-inch half-laps on each side. To prep for the crown faces, I trimmed off the half-laps and cut the stock to rough length. Just like a haircut, that process gets rid of the split ends too. Similar to the filler strips that were done earlier, a template was made and the 2 crown faces were cut to size. Then the bottoms were sanded to form a smooth curve. At this point, I was ready for the infamous glue up and wait time. The previously glued up filler strip was sandwiched between the 2 facing boards and clamped together. However, this time required an overnight wait as opposed to the standard 45 minutes. The only thing left to do on the crown was simultaneously sanding all 4 pieces on the top. As you can see from the pencil line, everything had been left proud of the final size so that this part of the construction could be accomplished now. The disc sander made quick work of this final step. The hinges. The hinges for these gates were somewhat of a problem. They had to be strong because of the weight they had to hold, and I wanted to be able to remove the gate from the seat wall if required. My decision was to use pintle and gudgeon hinges. A pintle is a pin that's inserted into a gudgeon. I headed to the local big box store and came home with the hardware. The only problem was that what I bought didn't look old world. The American architect Louis Sullivan coined the phrase, "Form follows function." So I decided to bury the hinges and get both form and function. I grabbed a 2x8 and cut 2 pieces to fit into the torsion box. A little glue and some clamps made them solid as a rock and ready to receive the hinges. This step was critical to keeping the gate firmly attached to the seat wall. Bending the hinges in preparation for installation was quick and simple. After checking that both hinges were bent the same way, I was ready to proceed. In order to keep the hinges strong and in place, it was required to put them in channels in the hinge blocks. I could have used a router with a mortising bit, set up a jig and created the channels that way, but I decided that an old world gate deserved some old world techniques. As a result, I plowed out the channels with chisels and a hammer. This wasn't the fastest way, and probably not the most efficient, but it seemed to be the appropriate way. The last step with the hinges was to liberally butter the channels with 2-part 5-minute epoxy and set the hardware with number 14 wood screws. These puppies aren't going anywhere. The shell. 35 pieces were required to make the shell. The main body consists of edge chamfered pieces, 24 tongue and groove slats, 4 vertical side members, and 4 horizontal cross members. In addition, there were 3 edge members. The tongue and groove slats were first. As I said earlier, most old barnwood siding in this area is 12 inches wide with half laps on each side. To prep for the shell, I trimmed off the half laps and cut the stock to rough length and width. The next step was to create the groove for the tongue and groove at the router table. The same game, 24 times. Of course, the tongues were next on the other edge of the boards. Can you count to 24? The chamfering of both edges was the last operation to complete for the tongue and groove slats. Not 24 this time, but 48. In 1977, Major Charles Winchester, the obnoxious surgeon from the TV sitcom MASH, while explaining his approach to surgery, said, "I do one thing at a time, I do it very well, and then I move on. In my case, I do one thing at a time, I do it not so well, and then I do it again, and again, and again. However, I think it's finally time for the assembly." This process is simply a matter of wrapping the torsion box with all the boards produced in the last step. Starting in the middle and working outwards is a safe method to keep all the pieces symmetrical. Applying a liberal coat of waterproof glue, inserting the tongue into the groove, or the groove over the tongue depending on which side of the face is currently under construction, quickly turns the egg crate into something that starts resembling a gate. Squaring each piece as you go ensures that everything is being placed in an appropriate position, and adding some brads acts both as a clamp and a second level of fastening. In order for the crown to fit in place, the gate is flipped over and the tops of all the faceboards are trimmed to match the torsion box. A Japanese pull saw works very well for this task. All the gluing, fitting, nailing, and cutting procedures are repeated on the opposite side of the gate. The best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. That saying is adapted from a line in To a Mouse by Robert Burns, the Scottish poet. Very loosely translated, it means that no matter how carefully a project is planned, something may still go wrong. And it did. The crown was designed and constructed with a cavity sized to match the thickness of the torsion box and the shell. Unfortunately, the selected boards were a bit too thick and warped to fit into the space provided in the crown. As a result, the gate and I had a 2.5-hour battle royale. With a plane, some chisels, sandpaper, a dead blow hammer, power straps, and a little elbow grease, it finally went together properly. Meanwhile, back on the project, after cutting the sides and bottom to size, and cutting slots for the hinges, it was a simple task to glue and nail them into position. With the help of my friend Dennis, holes for the clavos were drilled in the crown. The balance of clavos holes were drilled in the other members as well. Then, like the sides and the bottom, both the vertical and horizontal boards were glued and nailed into position. To ease the sharp edges, I put a chamfer on the inside of the boards on side 1. Then I flipped it over and chamfered the other side. After changing bits on the router, I put a round corner on all the outside edges. Another flip, some more round cornering, and the assembly was complete. Finish. To ensure that the finish would penetrate deeply, it was decided to apply a water-based dye stain in lieu of regular stain. In addition, the desired color was available in an off-the-shelf dye which precluded having to create a special color. After the gate was cleaned off with compressed air, it was time to take all the old wood and make it more appealing. Creating a silk purse from a sow's ear was simply a matter of brushing, brushing, brushing. 2 coats on each side with the recommended drying time took 4 days. Not much time spent brushing, but a lot of time spent waiting for the drying. Patience, Rick, patience. Between the rough texture of the wood grain and the fact that the dye really soaked into the barnwood, the application became a process of dabbing rather than brushing. And I don't know about you, but I don't much care to watch paint dry. So let's speed this up and get on with the project. The clavos. To enhance the old world appearance of the gate, I wanted to use clavos. There's many street slang meanings for the Spanish word clavo. However, the literal translation is nail. A clavo grande is a spike, and muchos clavos grandes were used as fasteners in much of Old World construction. Even though I made the gate lighter by the use of a torsion box, I wanted neither the additional weight nor the expense of purchasing replica clavos, so I decided to make my own. After looking at pictures of old clavos, I chose one that would most closely fit the Old World theme. I drew up the plans and headed for the shop. My scrap bin contained multiple cutoffs from 2x4s previously used. They'd fit the bill perfectly for the task at hand. The first step was to cut strips to thickness. Then pass those strips through the table saw again to achieve the correct width. The strips could then be sliced into chunks. The result was pieces that were 3/8 of an inch thick and 1 1/8 inches square. A jig from a previous project, slightly modified, would work perfectly to align the pieces for drilling. With a Forstner bit installed in the drill press, the holes were easily centered and drilled to the correct depth to accept the clavo stems. As before, the result was pieces that were 3/8 of an inch thick and 1 1/8 inch square, but now they've got 1/2 inch dimples and 1/8 of an inch deep. After creating another simple jig to control the small pieces, it was time to knock off the 4 corners. A simple process, but somewhat time-consuming. So at this point, I've got a bunch of little stop signs with a dent in the middle. A few more steps and they should look like clavos. Making the stems was a simple process of cutting a 1/2 inch dowel into 3/4 inch pieces. Then on a disc sander, roughly chamfering one end to allow for easy insertion into the gate. After gluing the stems into the stop signs, I had a ton of toad tables. One more jig and over to another disc sander. Sand and rotate, 4 times for each piece. Over and over, sand and rotate. They're actually beginning to look like the clavos I set out to make. The application of 2 or 3 coats of Rust-Oleum's black hammered paint and primer complete the illusion of the old handmade wrought iron clavos. A bit of work, but I think they'll add a nice touch to the gate. The carved initial. Staying with the original design concept, I wanted to include a carved initial on the circular plaque in the middle of the gate. As it was going to be quite prominent, and given the fact that I don't carve, I asked my friend Jeff Hofbauer to create it via computer and his CNC machine. This process is rather long and quite complicated to discuss in this video. So in the interest of brevity, I'm just mentioning the highlights to give you an idea of what's involved. CNC stands for Computer Numerically Controlled. So as the name implies, it's a carving tool on a gantry that can move left and right, forward and backward, and up and down at the command of a computer. These machines are very efficient in the way they work in all 3 directions in near perfect unison, giving this machine the capability of carving extremely complex shapes. The first step, of course, was for me to give him the design I wanted carved. I got on the computer and printed out a large capital A in an Old English font. That seemed appropriate for the task at hand. He imported it directly into his computer and outlined the letter using drawing tools in his design program. His next step was to create a tool path. Then, after selecting his tool bit of choice and many other technical parameters, he previewed the image to see if it was going to output the way he wanted. Viewing the result in 3 dimensions revealed that all was well. The generated computer code was finalized and he was ready to carve. I had previously supplied him with the barnwood I wished to use. He mounted it on the bed and clamped it down. Finding the center of the board and the distance from the tip of the bit to the board told the machine where to begin. A flip of the switch and the carving began. The letter A was first and the circle was next. Jeff and his CNC did a great job. Circa 1920, Avis Bergeson Christensen penned the lyrics for a tune titled "This Little Light of Mine." The carved initial on this gate is Dee and Steve Adams' Little Light onto their patio. So as the song says, "This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine." In order to make the Adams gate initial shine, it was decided to give it a coat of gold leaf. Given the price of gold, most leaf is actually made from 85% copper and 15% zinc. It's generally 1/10 of 1 micron thick. A stack of 1,000 sheets is the same thickness as a typical piece of printer paper. It's nearly weightless, and the slightest movement of air will cause it to wrinkle. And if held too long, it'll melt between your fingers. The procedure involved in applying leaf is very time-consuming and laborious. A thin layer of adhesive leaf sizing is applied to the surface, small sections at a time. The adhesive is allowed to dry for about 45 minutes and become tacky. The leaf is then applied onto the tacky surface using a soft brush to rub it gently. Excess leaf is removed by the same method. This process is repeated as many times as required to coat the desired surface with leaf. After all is said and done, the letter will be sprayed with 2 or 3 coats of a special leaf sealer. It's said that this leaf will maintain its integrity outdoors for 30 years or more. That's good enough for me. The hardware. The gate is virtually finished and ready to go out. She has her makeup on and is now ready for the jewelry. The clavos, strap hinges, and initial plate will complete the old world design style by giving the gate a sense of antiquity and creating an atmosphere that seems to be from another time. The finished gate. What you've seen in this video is the building of one gate. When the first one was complete, I repeated the entire process again. Designing and building these gates was quite a journey. When I took on the project, I knew that I was going to learn a lot before it was finished. And I did, about the build and about myself. In 1978, Art Linkletter wrote, "I believe none of us should ever stop growing, learning, changing, and being curious about what's going to happen next. None of us is perfect, so we should be eager to learn more and try to be more effective persons in every part of our lives." These gates in the build process was yet another lesson for me. I learned a lot about the craft, and among other things, I learned that all things good to know are hard to learn. Thanks for viewing this video. If you have any comments, please email them to rdw@foxvalley.net. And if you're interested in my other projects, visit www.youtube.com/user/RickWilsonRetired.